screen right here, and there's a dot going back and forth, back and forth. Graphically speaking, this is the eyes going left, right, okay? So this is really important. If you just look at this, the blue line is the dot, the green and red line is the eye. So look at this line, the green and red line it's following the blue line, but there's a lot of stuff going on that line right there. It's not smooth. And this is what I showed you yesterday, Misty. In general, you're following the target, but look at all this extra motion of the eyes. Look at these eyes just kind of batting around here. They call it oscillations or intrusive saccades. There's a lot of intrusive movement. Your eyes should just be going like this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, nice and smooth. But there's so much interruption in that smooth movement, it's virtually impossible to learn things from your environment, particularly written word, particularly engaging in social context where you need to follow things, driving, etc. All of these things involve these slow pursuit movements. Did you have a question on that?
No, it's because the eyes are constantly moving.
Yeah. If you look here, if I just hit play again, you'll see a lot of it in the beginning. Any one of these little bumps here indicates another unwanted movement. These are all unwanted movements. It should just be smooth like the blue line here.
Wow.
So you'll see instead of the eyes going smoothly back and forth, there's all of this extra shaking and intrusive movement. And what does that do too? That triggers stress responses. If your eyes are just trying to follow a target and they can't stay on it and have to keep coming back to it, that triggers fight or flight. So that's constant fight or flight activation to the point where those systems don't even work well anymore because we're constantly in that mode, adrenal burnout, adrenal fatigue, and then we have these chronic health conditions that we deal with. So this is just a system that's been struggling likely for a long time. We see these very classically in concussion, post-concussion syndrome, traumatic brain injury. So there's no doubt there's some influence of hits to the head over time on this, untreated concussions and balance and vestibular and eye movement challenges, okay? These systems are all plugged in. Our eye movements, our inner ear balance systems, our postural muscle systems are all plugged into one another. So if there's problems here, there's going to be problems in the balance like we'll see. There's going to be problems in postural muscle integrity like we'll see. Even when you get fatigue, Misty, you just kind of get into that, that floppy kind of posture state because those muscles are now failing. So we have to get all of these systems up to par just so you can engage in life at a basic level, right?
And so when you say concussions, you're
All
also
the times
referring to
I've-
overdoses or
All the times I've fallen off my
Absolutely.
horse and hit
all
my
the other
head.
insults
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
absolutely. The brain goes without oxygen for a period of time. All of the above. I can show you case after case. We had 2 anoxic brain injury cases last week, and they had this exact same thing going on. Anoxic brain injury is when you lose oxygen to the brain. So this is very, very common. This indicates brain stem injury. It indicates other aspects of visual tracking insults or injury. The good thing is in most cases we can start to get these things to become smoother, more efficient, right? Doesn't happen overnight, but just doing these things literally hundreds and hundreds of times, certain eye exercises to create stability, begins to allow these systems to do what they were designed to do. Therefore, it becomes easier to read, it becomes easier to talk with somebody, it becomes easier to drive, go into a supermarket. A lot of people can't even go in supermarkets because it's so overwhelming, because there's so much movement to process and the brain just simply can't do it effectively. So as these movements get faster, more breakdown, right? You see these lines just get a lot more erratic. These jumps off of the target become much bigger. So this right here is the eyes trying to follow, and all of a sudden they jump way off and come back, right? So you'll see here, they're trying to go right, and then when they come left, you're gonna see all of these big jumps here, boom, boom. And then this just goes consistently throughout. Again, then the blinking starts because the brain gets a bit confused and really struggles with processing that information. It's doing everything it can just to hang on to that. At the fastest speed, again, near complete breakdown of the movement, especially at the end here. This is a big sign of fatigue right here where it just really breaks down that heavily. But I'll show you here, same kind of deal. Same concept, just magnified a little bit. It's doing okay, in and around here, pretty decent, but then all of a sudden towards the end is really where it starts to get way off track.
So too much external stimulation causes.
Yeah, and then the brain is just,
Right.
I can't even just keep up with this thing anymore, so it's done.
Is there any reason why sometimes I look in the mirror and my pupils are different sizes?
Yeah, that's all brain control. Pupil sizes are a direct reflection of our autonomic nervous system. Fight or flight is big pupils, relaxation is small pupils. That's why certain medications will impact pupils, some make them big, some make them small. But also too, differences in pupil size indicate that autonomic nervous system is a bit different from one side to the other. So right brain versus left brain stuff. We're gonna be looking at that as we go through the weeks here in this kind of brain balancing, if you will. And that plays into things like infectious disease, et cetera. Our ability to fight infections has a lot to do with our left brain response to invading agents or pathogens.
Really?
Immune response is largely dictated by the left brain. Immune suppression is dictated more by the right brain. So folks that suffer from a lot of autoimmune issues are generally, and this is generally, there's always exceptions, are generally more right brain weaknesses than people that are dealing more with the ability to fight infections, basic infections, colds, flus, viruses, bugs, are generally more left brain deficiencies. So this is where we can start getting a little bit more specific from a brain-based approach. So up and down, same type of deal. Here's your eyes, just simply trying to follow the target downward. And they're doing pretty decent until they start to go up again. And you can see these little pops of the eyes. Instead of the smooth movement, you get these just more like jerks, just constant jerks of the eyes. And then again, just gets a little bit worse as the time goes on and the speed goes up. So ocular instability, one of the biggest issues we're going to be addressing over the next weeks together. Optokinetic responses, these are, about the time we're 2 years old, we have these reflexes that help us engage with our environment when there's a lot more movement, when we're up on 2 feet, rather than being on the ground. And these optokinetic responses really help us survive. This is, if your brain didn't have the ability to process movement in our environment, it would be bogged down with so much activity that it couldn't do what it needed to do physically and cognitively. So sitting there at a traffic light, all these cars are passing. If your brain can't ignore that information, it would just be on overload, right? There's always movement going on around us. So these responses were designed to help us kind of mitigate or offset that movement. And we'll see that they work pretty well to begin with, and then they just get tired. We should see this up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And here's where we should see this kind of beating eye movement. We want to see this type of thing happening just like that. So it's happening. And after a while, you'll see it just gets a little bit tired. These are very, very tired, sluggish responses, just weak. They work a little bit and then they kind of go away. So that just tells us after a while, whether you're in a car, whether you're in a store, whether you're just hanging out with friends, whatever, there's just a point where your brain just really struggles with processing input in the environment. And then that's the point where the more human brain just kind of shuts down. We're in fight or flight mode. It's very difficult to learn new information, retain new information. It's very difficult to inhibit impulses and make decisions when that front brain is just being shut off.
To stay calm.
That's it, yeah. Because you're driving on pure, primitive instinct, drive, desire. Your frontal brain just basically gets, if you ever read the book Biology of Desire, it's all about addiction. But Lewis, the PhD that wrote it, he talks a lot about the frontal lobes as the captain of the ship. And when people are in this constant fight or flight mode, the captain is basically just jumped overboard, and they're doing everything they can to throw a life preserver and get that captain back up in the, back in the wheelhouse, so it can steer the boat and make the decisions and do what it needs to allow us to be more human, right?
Right.
Because when we're not more human, we're more animal-like, we're more baby-like.
So when there's no captain, then the impulse control is gone. There's none.
Yeah, there's no impulse control. Our cortex, our more human brain, particularly our frontal brain,
Right.
its primary job is to inhibit lower brain functions. So, autonomic functions, heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, but also too, emotionality, things like that. Look at babies, they don't have good cortexes. If they're hungry, they cry. If they're happy, they scream. They throw themselves down on the ground when they don't get what they want. That's kind of what happens when we have injuries to the brain, or when we have developmental and behavioral struggles over time and traumas that build up. We just lose the ability for the frontal lobe to do what it was designed to do in a higher human. We see glimpses of it, but it struggles. Obviously you did really well with it at a point in your life, Misty, and there's no reason you shouldn't be able to begin to tap back into that. We just need to deal with this through very different means, not just, throwing a ton of chemistry at it, but really dealing with it from a neurodevelopmental perspective, building a neurological foundation such that your brain now has the ability to engage its frontal brain so that you can inhibit those more primitive instincts, drives, desires, etc.
Interesting.
So that was to the left. These responses to the right were pretty much non-existent. So here we see this kind of sawtooth type thing. We like that. We want that. That's what we should see. So now going to the right, we're really not seeing any of that. These are just kind of these jagged, haphazard lines. And going to the right, the response is very different. It's more kind of oscillation. The eyes are just bouncing back and forth a little bit. They're kind of stuck and they're struggling with this. They're trying to process that information, but they're having a hard time of it. And I think you got dizzy at this point too.
I was really tired.
Right. And this is where too, now you're going to see without any change in light, look at your pupils. They're going to start changing size because the system is just kind of tapping out here. So you're going to see all of a sudden the pupils are just going to start shrinking here toward the end. So right there, you see them just start shrinking.
Oh.
So that's autonomic dysregulation. You're just going, you're in this constant fight or flight mode, the pupils are big, and then that system just crashes, and now you finally get a little bit of a relaxation response at the end there, because the towel was thrown in, so to speak. So we've got to rehabilitate these systems. We've got to, there's no other way around it.
So when she gets like so exhausted from trying, then it just shuts down.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point where even the sympathetic responses can't even work
Right.
anymore, the fight or flight responses. So then the only other option there is that the relaxation response kicks in. But it's a very dysregulated system.
Right.
There's stress responses going for no reason, and then there's relaxation responses happening because the stress systems basically, just kind of go down to the gutter, so to speak.
And again, at those times, there's no impulse control when
No,
when
not
you
at
shut
all.
down.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very, very difficult, for anybody to engage in any higher level of cognition.
You're not going to have a calm conversation when
Not at all. And then the up and down, same type of deal there. So this is all those balls going in the downward direction. So you should be having that up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And there's really none of it there in the down direction. In the up direction, we get a tiny, tiny little bit of it. But these responses need a lot of rehabilitation. Okay. So let's go here to this balance. So those things, eye movements, plug directly into balance. Your balance, my goodness, for somebody who's done slack lines and all kinds of cool fire apparatus stuff. It's I've seen these performers. It's amazing what they can do, and just I'm sure you were equally as talented. But the deal is your balance is not great, and I know you know that now. But here to actually measure it and see it, this is the first two circumstances. There's a force platform right behind me here that she was standing on. And the first two circumstances are standing on the stable platform, eyes open and then eyes closed. So here's the deal. This is a database comparison. We're looking at your brain compared to other people your age. This is not male or female specific, just age specific. So you're in the 21st percentile with your eyes open on the stable surface. That's not good. You're at a high fall risk, actually.
I have fallen.
Yeah.
I've fallen hard.
And that's it. I mean, the last thing you need right now is another tap to the head or something like that. So, our biggest goals right now are stabilizing your visual and balance systems, bar none. We have to get those systems stable. As they become more stable, your more frontal human brain becomes more stable. Balance, you just Google balance and cognition, eye movements and learning, eye movements and cognition, eye movements and attention. You can Google these things and you'll get paper after paper after paper after paper that talks about the relationship between those types of systems and our higher human functions. Again, just look at babies. They can't regulate anything because they don't have good visual tracking systems, inner ear mechanisms. They don't have good postural systems. Same thing with somebody who's breaking down later in life. They've got dementia and they're, going to the bathroom wherever they want, and they're yelling at people and they're getting angry and their brain is becoming less and less human, and that goes along with their ability to maintain balance. They're using walkers and their gait is really wide based and they're falling all the time. So this shows you how proportional balance is to higher human function, but also to eye movements, postural muscle systems. They all play into it. So the fact that we're looking at 16th to 21st percentile on a stable surface with your eyes open and eyes closed, we've got some work to do. Those numbers will come up. We just got to put the work in and get it done. Unstable surface, 23rd percentile compared to your peers, eyes open. Once you close the eyes, that's where it really broke down. You went down the 2nd percentile. This is centimeters of sway. So you had on average about 20 centimeters of sway with your eyes open and closed on the stable surface. On the unstable surface, eyes open, 36 centimeters of sway. Now you close your eyes, you've got 160 centimeters of sway. So you're basically at the point of just very near falling.
He was standing right there because, and like, I was tempting to like open my eyes because I felt like I was gonna fall.
And it was that very reactionary where it was a little bit of sway and then all of a sudden it'd be that really fast jerk, which is quite dangerous. So we've got to stabilize those systems. Very consistent again with brain injuries, hits to the head, etc.
So I can't walk downstairs.
Yeah.
I lean. Remember when I like there was a mark on the wall from me like leaning, walking down the stairs because I just leaned my whole shoulder on it instead of
yourself.
Yeah.
Well, you couple that with faulty eye movements, and it is just a recipe for for injury. So here is the cognitive testing. Sorry, we're just learning this new system here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the cognitive testing was kind of all over the place. You had some really low scores and some really high scores. So database matched again. Anytime we do database testing, green is good, red not so good, yellow is somewhere in the middle. So you have one above average, a bunch of average scores, many in the very low category, and the rest in between. So here's the deal. Your overall, because there were a couple of invalid tests, so basically you didn't have enough responses to render a valid score. So with that, your overall cognitive capacity, they throw you into a very low percentile, in the 1st percentile. But there was invalidity to that. So we kind of just push that aside and look at the rest of the numbers here.
I really didn't think I saw any of those words before. I knew I saw them.
Right.
Like it was a list of 15 words, but I couldn't recognize any of them again.
And you're just going on instinct. That's your verbal memory right there, remembering the words. So you had a valid score and you were in the 1st percentile compared to your peers with remembering words. Visual-based memory, a little bit more right brain-based memory, 8th percentile. Here is a reaction time. I was really surprised this was up where it's at. So this is good. This is where we can use strengths to build weaknesses. You hear the term, or the phrase, the rising tide lifts all boats. We don't always have to go in and strengthen the weakness. We certainly want to work on the weakness, but oftentimes we can use the strength to build the weakness, okay? Kind of go in through the back door. And this is where we can do those things. Your reaction time scores were very good.
Reaction to what?
Basically, it's a reaction to a stimulus. Every time she sees something, she's got to tap a key on the keyboard. And there's other reaction time tests that we'll look at that actually have pretty decent scores. But we can use that to build things like attention. For example, your simple attention was in the 1st percentile compared to your peers. This is the classic ADD/ADHD test, the TOVA test of variable attention. Every time you see B, you hit the space bar, right? And it's a very tedious, monotonous, annoying
I was
test.
falling asleep too.
Yeah. Well, it is because as your brain is being forced to attend to something, you're just shutting off. You're just losing all your juice because it's taking you so much in resources to pay attention to these simple little things. Therefore, boom, you just tapped out. The tank is out of gas. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It takes a lot for you to pay attention, and this is why, because things like this. But we can use reaction time to build simple attention through the interactive metronome program that we'll talk about, that we did testing on. Some areas right in the middle, working memory, so actually taking bits of information, holding on to them, you do quite a bit better memory-wise. Reasoning scores right in the middle, your social acuity, recognizing faces, are people mad at you, happy with you, angry with you. You tend to read that pretty well. And kind of everything else in between. So again, a lot of work to do, and most of this work is going to happen through the physical systems, balance, eye movements, etc. Let's go back. So that interactive metronome program, this is all about timing, impulse control, focus, attention. These things are all linked. But attention, simple attention, I don't know if you've ever heard it put this way, but simple attention, or where you were in the 1st percentile, is directly linked, is actually looked at by many experts as the same exact thing as self-regulation, our ability to inhibit behaviors and emotions and things like that, to regulate our emotional output, is one and the same with attention, with simple attention.
Wow.
That's the same part of the brain, the dorsal prefrontal cortex. It's been written about in lots of books, but self-regulation and attention are one and the same thing. So this is really important because as we can boost your attention, we can boost your ability to regulate, or you can boost your ability to regulate emotional output and things like that. Impulse control as well being a big part of that picture. So overall, your timing abilities, we're just into the below average timing category, so you're right on the border of average and above average, which given everything else, I expected these numbers to be quite a bit worse than they were. But this tells us we can pull out of these numbers a lot quicker than some of the other numbers we're seeing. This test, interactive metronome, she's listening to a beat, an auditory cue, and she's reacting with body movements like clapping and opposite side of the body hits. There's sensors that are picking up her hand and foot responses. And overall, you were 78 milliseconds away from 0 or that perfect score. Perfect score, you had 12% of the time you were right on that beat, so that's pretty darn good for a first go round. Let's see, left side of the body a little bit slower than the right, so left side of the body was averaging about 90 millisecond averages, and the right side of the body 75 millisecond averages. So again, right brain, left brain, are we seeing more right brain weaknesses? And it would appear that we are in general seeing a little bit more challenge in the right frontal brain than we are the left, which makes sense. That's ADHD, that's that's autoimmunity, that's all kinds of things tied into that right brain weakness. If you look now, this is where you're going to really see some of your scores, like for your hands, both hands. You were well above average into an above average, almost exceptional timing category there. But when we get into the cross body stuff, right hand, left foot, left hand, right foot, so right brain communicating with left brain, that's where those numbers really went up and the responses were very, very slow and offbeat, okay? So again, we can use strengths to build weaknesses. Over the next week or so, we hope to get, 4, 5, 6,000 repetitions under your belt with just the hands. Over 15 days, we hope to have 10, 15, maybe 20,000 repetitions. That's where the magic happens, when you can get that type of repetition under your belt to make change in mechanisms like simple attention, reaction time, impulse control. That's what this program is all about. Just this one program is ideal for what you're dealing with right now. That's pretty much it there. Finally, we'll look at the EEG.
Are you following what he's saying? Really?
We'll have plenty of time to go over things too, Misty. I know I'm throwing
No,
out
it's
that
fine.
here.
I'm recording it, so
As
I
we say,
can.
kind of drinking from the fire hose right now. There's a lot coming at you. But we will have plenty of time to review and go over and all that good stuff. All right, so EEG. So here's the deal. We're looking at electrical output of the brain. And the big takeaway here is this. In general, these maps, if you've seen quantitative EEG or brain maps, these maps here are representative of different speeds of brainwave activity. So here your delta and beta are your slowest, your alpha is your mid-range, and your beta and high beta are your faster processing brainwaves. Really from here on up, everything looks really good. We're seeing some decreases in alpha brainwave activity in the back of the brain, which lends itself to challenges with focus and attention, which obviously is understandable. But here is this. We're seeing lots of oranges and reds and yellows in these delta and especially this theta range. So in general, front to back, side to side, the entire brain, particularly across this middle region, this sensory motor region, meaning how the brain feels and moves the body, but also has a lot of impact over cognitive output. There's a lot of slow brainwave activity. The brain's just getting bogged down. So when you have an excess amount of slow activity, your brain is more sleep-like during waking hours, right? So it's just kind of you're walking asleep basically.
Could this have anything to do with why I'm good at meditating?
Very possibly.
Like,
yeah. I mean, if you weren't a
it's really
meditator-
easy for me to just snap out and
Absolutely.
go there.
Yeah, and if
That's
you
so
were a
interesting.
meditator, we would probably see profound deficits in alpha brainwave activity. For people,
Wow.
people without pre-existing brain injuries and things like that are heavy meditators, we actually see excess of alpha activity in many cases. because that's what they're doing all day, is trying to garner alpha brainwave activity. But, you know, this also too, we see excess theta almost, you know, very, very consistently in concussion, post-concussion syndrome, particularly when it's repetitive injuries. The brain is just working too hard to get simple things done, it gets bogged down. So it may have something to do with the meditation, but my gut tells me it's probably more due to pre-existing injuries and insults. Yeah.
But being in that state would make it easier to just sort of check out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's was my thing. Yeah. Interesting.
We see people that have, you know, narcolepsy and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, this delta and theta is just lit up red front to back, side to side, because they can just turn it off at any minute. I mean, you certainly don't nod off as quick as some of our folks do. And then right here, this number, what's called alpha peak frequency. In the back of the brain, this is where alpha activity is generated. And, you know, being that you are a meditator, you know, I would expect this number to be quite a bit higher. This number generally ranges from 8 to 12 hertz or 8 to 12 cycles per second, and your average is 8.54, which means the brain is more towards the slow processing end of things versus the faster processing end of things. But this can be helped through things like neurofeedback. We may even do some pulsed electromagnetic frequency, low-level laser therapies can help as well. So there's lots of tools in the toolbox here, but we want to get this number up. The higher this number, the more cognitively able you are. That's just the way it goes. Okay. And again, likely from, you know, repetitive injuries over time. But there's a lot to work with here. I really see some good strengths that we can kind of latch on to build some of the weaknesses, allow you to simply do more as we go through the weeks here without overdoing it, and just, you know, start to build a foundation that you can move from and start to incorporate things in your daily routine that are going to just help this over time.
Can I ask a question? So, given how exhausted Misty is just like after one day, do you think that she's still going to get a lot of benefit out of this?
I believe she will. I believe she will. Yesterday was a different day. You know, testing days are generally very fatiguing.
Right.
Because just the cognitive testing alone is enough to wipe people.
Oh God, yeah, I've had.
So the cognitive testing, the eye testing, all of that, that's a lot at one time. It's necessary, but it's a lot at one time.
Right.
Now is where we go in and start to support metabolically and create, you know, efficiencies and change in the system that will just allow for more to be done. But all the while monitoring blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, all of these things to make sure that we're not overdoing it, because, you know, it can be overdone quite easily. And that's the challenge when most people start doing things, is they do too much too soon, and then they say, oh, that doesn't work, and just kind of put it aside.
So I think she's worried. Tell me, worried about not getting enough out.
Oh, I just don't want to waste everyone's money. Like, honestly, like.
This is, again, there's no perfect time. You know, there is no, and I know we've had this conversation. If we had to wait for that perfect time, you know, people would lose precious time. You know, your brain is young enough and moldable enough and plastic enough that it can make change regardless of the circumstances. So, you know, we certainly, all these other things have to be addressed while you're doing it, but, you know, it's not all for naught. There are certain people that we just say this is not the right time and we shouldn't be doing it. But, you know, in your particular case, Misty, we've got to deal with it. We're dealing with chronic, you know, long-term infectious disease and things like that, you know, we have to work alongside it. We have to work alongside it.
So there's no bad time? No?
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
Okay.
All right. So
can I get the files of this?
Yeah,
it's so
all
interesting.
All right now is Jamie will get that to you. It's all in your. We're just getting used to this thing, but everything has been uploaded into this, your Jane app.
It'll be in an app.
JaneApp.com.
Oh, that's exciting.
Right here, so you've got all your files right here in your chart.
Oh, cool.
You have an app for that?
I
There's an app for
can
that.
get
There's an
one.
app for that?
That's actually fun. Jane App doesn't have an app, but it's a website. You just go to the website and pull it up.
Really?
Yep. It's all there.
Oh.
Okay.
All right, Misty, you ready?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.